Boom. And hello, everybody, and welcome to Magical Journey. Before we get started today, I've got a couple of things I want to bring to you guys' attention. First of all, the website. It is fully functional. It is up. It is updated. It is all the things all the time. So go on to magicaljourney.com and check out all the latest stuff going on there. You have access to the audio feed, the video for the podcast. You also have all of my social media and so forth. Are you guys able to hear me okay and clearly tonight? I want to check in with my audience and make sure, because last week we had some issues. Yes, you can. Okay, good. I was like, are we in the sighting stage? The other thing that I want to let you guys know about uh, is the Patreon. So I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I will tell you now, the Patreon site is fully functioning, up and locked and loaded. We are 100% active on there now, and there is content that you can get there that you can get no place else. So check it out. The link is on the website, and you will be able to go on there. There's two tiers. There's the free tier, and there is a paid tier. The paid tier is less than a cup of coffee, especially at Starbucks and Dutch Brothers. So there's that. All right. Without further ado, I have a guest who I've been really excited about getting on lately, because he has some views and opinions that I have not heard anywhere else before. And when my mod Pam suggested this guy, I went full force looking for him and seeing what he was about. And I was like, wow, I'm good with this. I'm real good with this. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage Brad Lail. Hey.
What's up, dude? How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good. I love your intro, man. Your intro reminds me of like a Quentin Tarantino movie or something along those lines. I love it.
Thank you.
It got me in the Tarantino-esque mood. So
Yeah, I was trying to find something that wasn't so terribly typical of some of the podcasts now, because everything is all like, you know, weird and or rappy and so forth. And I was like, I want weird, but I want calm weird.
right.
Right. All right. So tell our folks a little about you, and if you have something you would like to promote, like your channel, go ahead and do so.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, man. My name is Bradley Lail. I'm the host of the Awaken podcast. I talk a lot about consciousness and energy and frequency and vibrations, and it's turning into a lot of religion talk as well. It's a lot of spirituality talk. There's a lot of talk about paranormal. Obviously, everybody wants to hear about paranormal stuff and conspiracy stuff as well. So I talk a little bit about everything. I try to break it. I tried to break it up a couple weeks ago, and I had a guy named Cody Tucker on, and we just talked about movies. So sometimes I don't always like to have it so heavy and so dark and so, you know, just moody, I guess you could say. Sometimes I want to talk about something other than paranormal and conspiracy and all that stuff. So every once in a while, you might get something completely off the wall, something totally different. You might even get a baseball podcast every now and then. I don't know, but for the most part, I stick to the spirituality stuff. And but yeah, you guys can, like I said, you can find me at theawakenpodcast.com, where you can get all the links to Spotify and Apple and YouTube and all that stuff. I don't really have a YouTube presence. I am actually currently in the process of building my YouTube channel right now. Got a lot of past episodes to upload. So if you guys want to follow me on there, you could definitely follow me at I believe the Waken Pod on YouTube. And I also have a Patreon where you can get ad-free audio currently. And then I'm going to be trying to do more field investigating for hidden history, hidden artifact stuff in the national forest and stuff like that. So I'm going to be hopefully doing more YouTube related content related to that. I got a buddy of mine named Ryan, for example. He and I live right down the road from these things called the Carolina Bays, which are these eddies, these perfectly circle elliptical, I guess you could say, water eddies that a lot of paranormal activity come out of. So he and I are going to go out there and investigate the Carolina Bays and talk a little bit about that. So hopefully you'll see more of that stuff on my Patreon and my YouTube channel coming up. So, subscribe, and hopefully you guys will get some good stuff in the future. I'm a full-time, I own my own business. I'm a dad. I coach Little League baseball. I got a daughter as well. So I'm busy, man. I got a couple acres of grass to cut and all that good stuff. Got a little farm I'm trying to start. So got a lot going on, dude. I'm really busy. So hopefully I can get more content out to you guys here in the near future. So.
Wow. You have a child, a job, a wife, land to cut. There's like, how do you even have time to sleep and eat?
Dude, I mean, honestly, it's like I try to I stay up really late, and I try to get that's my me time, I guess you could say. Sometimes I'll just I'll watch a YouTube channel like yours, or Ry Voss from Codex of Curiosities, as Pam's over there all the time, Tom as well, him, the Eye of Jupiter. So yeah, shout out to you guys, and thank you, Pam, for bringing me on the show. I appreciate that. As Dan was just mentioning a while ago. So but yeah, I just try to find time, man. I like to stay busy. I don't like being idle, but sometimes it's too much, because I have 2 or 3 different businesses actually, so it's not just one. There's a lot of things going on right now.
Wow. And on top of all that, you have time to read.
Yeah.
And I know this because I was listening to some of your podcasts in the process of prepping for this, and you go deep on some things, and that's kind of where we want to go tonight. Maybe not super deep, but we want to go there. One of the things that you've talked about on your podcast before is plasma and what plasma is. So let's dive into that a little bit and camp there for a few minutes. Um, what is plasma actually? Just simple plasma.
So plasma is the fourth state of matter, essentially, right? I mean, it's a soup of ionized gas, which is free electrons and positively charged ions. So everything is sort of everything in this universe is made of plasma. You know, we're sort of swimming in this plasma. Plasma plasma used to be called the ether a long time ago. I mean, over 150 years ago, they were still teaching it in schools as classical metaphysics, or that's what physics was. There wasn't any talk of science. There was no differentiating science from spirituality. And then in the early 1900s came along, the General Education Board came in, which is the Rockefeller's Foundation, and that was in 1904 or 1903, I believe. And then Einstein's theory of relativity was 1905, coincidentally. And then the talk of plasma came into being about 20 years later. So they just basically stopped talking about ether altogether, but it was discussed for thousands of years. So so in ether is known as the fifth element, and those two things are not different. And I'm starting to think that also consciousness, it's the conduit for consciousness as well. So ether, plasma, all of that, whatever name you want to put to it, is what connects us all. We're kind of swimming in this, like, fish don't know they're in the ocean, right? Excuse me. We're in this, we're kind of like fish in the ocean. We're just swimming around. We just don't realize we're in this plasma. So there's this state of dispersed ions that kind of exist all the time around us. And that happens because when the sun comes out, it disperses the plasma back into its soup-like state. And when the sun goes away, it quickly reforms into something. And in that moment is whenever paranormal activity happens. And that happens at dusk and dawn, basically. That's whenever plasma sort of becomes this, like, I call it a plasma portal because that's just a catchy name for it. But it really is, it's a mix of something that I have struggled with trying to explain this pretty concisely and easily for people to understand. Because to be honest with you, I don't fully understand it myself because I barely graduated high school. So like, I don't know a lot about physics and stuff myself, but from reading, I'm starting to understand more about what's going on. Essentially, the sun sends, if you think about the sun, and you take a hammer and hit the back of the sun, it shoots a bolt of energy or solar winds towards Earth. And I'll just save everybody a lot of time. It turns into a Birkeland current. The Birkeland current strikes the Earth and creates an electromagnetic pulse. And that pulse comes out of the cracks and crevices in the ground, which are faults, fissures, streams, volcanoes, things like that. And that pulse is what's called a telluric current. And that telluric current is just natural electric currents that come out of the Earth. When that current comes out, it creates its own magnetic field. And it has this like a little toroid spinning. And so that happens as the sun is sort of drifting away and going to another region of Earth, when it gets dark, so at dusk. And as these telluric currents spin along the Earth, like I said, when the sun's out, it disperses everything. When the sun goes away, they quickly form into this plasma reforms into what's called a complex plasma.
Mm-hmm.
And this complex plasma is sort of floating around. And you can think of it like the jellyfish UFO video from Jeremy Corbell that he posted a year or two ago, whatever it was, from Iraq. It's just a blob, like a jellyfish, just kind of floating around. That's what a complex plasma is. And then this telluric current kind of spins along the Earth, right? It's like it's a little vortex of energy sort of spinning along the Earth. And these things, these complex plasmas, find ways to hit that magnetic field and then form into a toroidal shape. And we can see a lot of evidence of this, especially in December, whenever the so-called drones were in the air. They're actually plasmoids, because that's what happens when a complex plasma hits a magnetic field. It turns into a plasmoid. And one of them turns into a donut ring or a halo, or like a glowing circle. Multiple of them, when fired at each other, there was a guy named Winston Bostic in the 1950s who studied this. He accidentally came across this. He actually discovered by shooting plasma into a magnetic field, it created that little donut, like I said. And he was weirded out because it was like this glowing thing that was flying around. He's like, what in the world is this? So he decided to shoot a bunch of them at each other. And the more he shot at each other, the more it started creating. What they would do is those little toroids would form together, and they would create these little orbs. Essentially, he was calling it ball lightning because he didn't have any other description for it. And in fact, that's what a lot of people call it now, is ball lightning. So one complex plasma shot into a magnetic field becomes a toroid. A plasmoid, by the way, is a plasma toroid. That's all that is. So if you get multiple of them, they start spinning around and they end up forming what looks like the flower of life, essentially. And so they're kind of floating around. These glowing balls are just floating around. And when they come into our reality as that magnetic ball of light and energy, it's pulling from these ions that are available in the atmosphere, that are just kind of, think about like when an animal dies, their putrefied remains sort of disperse back into that plasma field. Right. And so they're kind of all around us, these dead particles, these dead skin cells, and all this other stuff is kind of floating all around us. Well, that's why you get shapeshifters and stuff like that, because these plasmoids, what they'll do, or these orbs, what they'll do is they'll quickly grab onto those ions and form into something. And that's why when they come into existence, they smell terrible, and they look like, if they're in the swamps, they're going to look like Bigfoot type creatures, or like a hybrid of a bunch of different, maybe a half fox, half deer, things like that. And so again, if they're in the sky and they form into a metal shape, it's because they're pulling from the metal ions that are available in the atmosphere. So they come out at night, obviously, and as the sun, and that's when they're the most active. Everybody in the paranormal world knows that's when they're the most active. They avoid God's light, because the sun is God's light. It disperses them back into plasma. So they're trying to do everything they can to stay in this reality. So they hide in underground, bases. They have, they live in the cave systems. They live in underwater. That's why you see a lot of USOs out in the ocean and stuff like that, because the deeper they can go, the easier they can hide from the sun, basically. And during the day, they create these metal casings around their orbs to protect them from being dispersed back into that plasma state. So I kind of just jump right into it, I guess. I didn't mean to just get right into all of it, but that's essentially what it is, there's this plasma that's all around us, and then they form when the sun goes down, when the sun is starting to drift over into another region of Earth, they quickly form into these complex plasmas, and these complex plasmas are highly intelligent. And they know that complex plasmas are highly intelligent because they study what's called the Kordylewski clouds, which are these two giant clouds that are hovering above Earth. And so when they study these clouds, they see, oh my God, it's nonlinear intelligence. And what that means is, like, you and I, or a normal computer, basically they're supercomputers. And a normal computer, if you give it a computation, it will go, if this, then that. It will continue going on this upward trajectory of, processes. 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4, and so on and so on and so on. But with nonlinear supercomputers like complex plasmas, they're chaotic. And really, that's sort of the reality we live in, is this chaotic world where we kind of have this thing about us where we hate going to work every day. And the reason we hate going to work every day is because we're non-linear as well, because every new moment creates that you can determine the new outcome. So if we're caught in this frequency loop, because everything is frequency and energy, but if we're caught in this frequency loop and we're not evolving into that photon of light that we're these light beings. We're light beings because we're made in God's light. We're human,
Right.
HUE-MAN. So we're color beings that are manifestations. So we're light beings that are manifestations. And so our whole makeup is that non-linearity, that that evolving into an enlightened or a more enlightened person, and being creative and creating things. And so when we go to our 9-to-5 jobs, that's why everybody hates them, because you're stuck in traffic every day and you're doing the same routine. You go home, you eat your dinner, you go to sleep, you watch your news or whatever, you go to sleep, you wake up, you do it all over again. And we get into this boring routine. But I just don't think that that's how life is supposed to be. I didn't mean to take it down that path, but essentially that's, the nonlinearity is, I think, the nature of a lot of things. And currently there's our world in this, we're in this little tiny fraction of light on the electromagnetic spectrum. We're at about 0.0035% in the visible light spectrum. That means that there's 99.965% of spiritual world around us that we can't see. And so if you think about it, man, we're the aliens. We're the ones that are different. And all these things that are out there are trying to get into here and to be into God's perfect light and temperature and everything in this perfect world that we live in. Because just think about how the temperature is always perfect, and everything that happens in our body is perfect. And so, I think that those things want to be here in God's light, and they're doing these hybrid breeding programs to try to, come into our reality as well. And it's just not going to work because, again, we're very unique because we're made in God's image. We're created by God. So these things they can try all they want, but they're not going to be able to successfully create a hybrid being that could live on Earth. I don't think.
Right. And I feel that too, because in essence, one of the theories that I've heard people talk about is how we, on this plane and this level of existence as we are, have dominion. They, on the other hand, are really their existence is literally within the air for the most part, is the way that some people like to put it. And they're really not, they really don't have any authority here. They don't have any real anchor here. So what you're saying really aligns with a lot of stuff, and it also makes sense in the sense of explaining some things about common denominators with sightings of cryptids and some of the high strangeness that occurs around them and so forth. You mentioned their smell. That is one area that everybody seems to agree on, that they all smell fairly strong. I say everybody, not everybody does agree on that, but is quite common that people agree with that.
And when you say the name of Christ, a lot of times these things will disperse. And the reason, and I just talked with a guy named Ed Mabry on my show about this, and he said that in the Bible. And again, not to take this biblical, because I don't know if this is a Bible type of show like that, but I just want people to know too that I am religious. I grew up a Christian, but I haven't been paying attention much to it for the past 25 years since I became an adult. I'm 42 now. But as I gotten older, I've started to realize like a lot points back to the Bible, and Christ would ask the name of demons because he wanted to know what frequency to say to disperse the demons back into, into the ether. And but so he would say a word that would be a dissonant frequency to whatever their frequency is that they're trying to come in at. And that when Christ died, that frequency became Christ. And so the word Christ is the frequency of light and love and the embodiment of the human spirit. And so when that name is said, it resonates for us and it provides a dissonant frequency for them. So yeah, I don't again, not to take it to like a spiritual, like, I mean, that's a spiritual show. To be honest with you, I didn't even think that my show would be a spiritual show. I was just going to be talking about cryptids and all the stuff that we're talking about now. And then as the evidence comes forward, I'm like, oh my God, there's this and there's that. It's kind of hard to ignore this. And when you hear testimony from, not testimony, I guess, when you hear Bob Lazar talking about there's a 2 or 3 inch book about religion that was like top secret, top class, highly classified and things like that, it starts to make a lot of sense. So yeah, again, I don't mean to take it there, but I'm a Christian, and I guess any moment I get to talk about Christ and love, I will. So
right. And that is part of, I try to keep a very open mind about things and say, well, let's not put everything into the category of demon, or demon, as some people call it. But in the sense of the very core of Christian belief, there's a serious conflict between being too open-minded and the reality of good versus evil. There's the whole concept of, one could argue, if you don't believe that there is evil, then why do you believe that Jesus was even a thing? I mean, that is ultimately, when we come to the hardcore reality of the situation, it would literally nullify all things that Christians believe in if there wasn't evil in the world. So there's that.
Yeah, it's good. It's light and dark. That's what no matter which way you look at it, that's what it is. I mean, you're going to see that, in all of the religious textbooks going way back, it's light versus dark. And I think that's an important aspect of it, because in my opinion, if you think about the frequency of a wavelength, right? You know how it goes up and down like a squiggle line. At the crest of that it shoots off this little photon of light. And I think that is us, right? When we go to work, like I mentioned earlier, we kind of get caught in that little loop. When we evolve, like spiritually, we shoot off a new version of ourselves. Excuse me. And that new version of ourselves is like a little photon of light, like I said. Well, if you think about the hill on that wavelength, everything that's underneath that is the upside down, like from Stranger Things. So if you think about on Stranger Things, when Elle was trying to crush the can with her mind, what she was doing was crushing the can from the antimatter. So if we're material, if we matter, if we're matter, if we're living in the material world, she was trying to crush the can from that antimatter. And so she crushed it from the inside, right? Rather than, so if you think about a mountain, or I like to use a trampoline. If you go up underneath the trampoline and you stick your fist up, it looks like a mountain. Well, there's something underneath that. If you're not looking underneath it to see if there's a hand there, it looks just like a mountain. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say, is like, there's this upside down world, this antimatter that these things live in. It's dark, it's cold, it's a low vibration. You know what I mean? It's what hell would be like, right? They're disembodied entities. They're just floating around, and they can see us, and they can see us enjoying steak and sex and cigarettes and all these other, things that we enjoy as humans, and they want that. And, they will trick us in every way they can to come into this reality. And I think part of that is like these stone circles, like Avebury and Stonehenge, and they just discovered one in Lake Michigan that was 9,000 years old. It's at the bottom of the lake. So what our past civilizations would do is they thought that these things were good in some way. So they built these stone circles, which is, if you're going Bigfoot hunting and all that stuff, I don't recommend necromancy, but if you're wanting an experience, get you a bunch of blue stones, little small blue stones, and sit them in a circle near running water, like a stream or something like that. And I guarantee you will have an experience, because again, that telluric current comes out of the stream, hits that blue stone, and it sort of encircles it, and it keeps it kind of spinning in one place. So it creates these little portals, these little vortex of energies. And that's where the complex plasmas fly into. So what I think that the past civilizations were doing was they were being tricked by these things. Oh, I'm your grandma, I'm your mom, I'm, your Uncle Louie or whoever, you used to remember I used to go fishing with you all the time. And then you go, oh my God, that was my Uncle Louie, because only he knew I went fishing with him all the time. And then they'd say, build us a, stone circle right here at this location. They would always, so those locations are always near volcanoes. They're always near faults, fissures, streams, things like that. And I think that that's what happened. They would encircle this energy to make it easier for these things to come in. And you see it. I mean, it still happens a lot at Stonehenge. It still happens a lot at Avebury and all these other places. And I think that there was a moment in the world where everybody was sort of blowing these things up. Like they were destroying Stonehenges and places like that. They were burying Göbekli Tepe and places like that to prevent these things from coming in again. And so I'm not, again, I don't recommend anybody build stone circles or anything like that, but typically that's what happens when people do necromancy, when they do these witches build these circles. I've seen different religions do it when they try to do their chants and things like that. Native Americans, some rabbinical priests will do it. I don't know if that's the word from priests, but they'll do it when they do these certain chants, and they'll do it in the middle of a stone, in the middle of a stone circle. So I think you have to be very careful about that, because you could be opening something that will follow you around, for your whole life if you if you're not careful. So
attachments.
Yeah.
It's very possible. Very possible. So what is your thoughts on places like Skinwalker Ranch, and here in the South we have the Meadows?
Where are you at in the South?
I am in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Okay. I don't believe I've heard of the Meadows.
The Meadows is roughly in Alabama. That's about the most we know about it.
Yeah, I do. I remember reading a book about. I remember reading. It was like Tales from the Southeast, and is that near Tuscaloosa?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure about the exact locations or locations it's near. I do know that Trey Hudson is one of the people that is involved with that.
Yeah, that is the same. Yeah, I actually want to go there because I think it's on the 33rd parallel. That's why I asked, because and I talk a lot about the 33rd parallel, which is just it's just a warm region of Earth. If you think about a line of Earth that goes around the globe, it's essentially like the equator, and it's a warm region, and that's where a lot of this activity happens, and that happens to be the warmest region of Earth whenever the sun's out, right? So it makes a lot of sense that you're going to get a lot of paranormal activity there. But yeah, me and my little brother have been exploring these different areas throughout the Southeast. I'm from South Carolina, so we've been to Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, all these other places, and we plan on going out to Arizona, New Mexico, California, and hopefully Catalina Islands as well. So we do plan on exploring some of these places. And that's what I mentioned earlier. With hopefully the Patreon, I'll start doing more of that kind of that kind of stuff with showing videos of these places that nobody has ever seen before or has ever even heard of. There's a place, for example, called the Blythe and Taglios, which is in Arizona. Well, it's I can't remember if it's it's in between two states. It's like on the border of California. There's these like three giant, what looks like aliens from the sky almost. There's these like these tall figures, and they're what do you call it? Geoglyphs that you can see from the sky. And
Right.
there's three of them, and they're all located on the 33rd parallel. But again, that's one of those places that nobody's ever heard of. I've been to places like I said, in Georgia, like these effigies that you can only see from the sky that, I grew up a few hours away from this place, and I never heard of it in my life. And so in the same with Moundville, which is in Tuscaloosa,
Right.
there's these mounds all over the Southeast, all over, you got Poverty Point in Louisiana, Moundville, you got Winterville Mounds. There's the Etowah Mounds in Georgia. So you got a lot of places that nobody even knows exist. And so when you say mounds, they go, or when you say pyramids in the United States, they go, what are you talking about? And I go, well, they call them mounds. And they go, well, yeah, we've heard a little bit about mounds, just dirt mounds. And I'm like, but if you've ever been to these places, you'll see a totally different thing. It looks like, what essentially are these Aztec type pyramids where they're like flat tops, you know what I mean? So technically they don't come to a point, but they look like the pyramids you see in, Mesoamerica, that region. So, but it just feels like all that stuff was hidden from us. And you can go into the national forest anywhere and probably come across a bunch of like megalithic structures and stones and these different petroglyphs and these different just weirds in little stone circles and things like that. There's a group of guys called Appalachian Intelligence guys. I don't think they do a podcast anymore, but they used to. And that's how they started their podcast, was because they went into the woods and they found this giant, what looks like a pyramid with all these weird hieroglyphs all over it. And then they started exploring it more and all this stuff. And it turns out that it's some sort of, pyramid structure that's just hidden in the woods, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's exploring it. Nobody's digging through it and stuff like that. There's a place in South Carolina that it's in like Blackville, South Carolina, I believe, that they are doing an excavation project on something similar, where it's kind of like a mini Gobekli Tepe, right? But nobody's heard of it. And so I'm going to be doing a show with Ry Voss from Codex of Curiosities about this soon. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we're going to just talk about some of these same topics, because again, they're not explored. I mean, I'm going to physically go to the place a couple hours away from me and explore it myself, and then actually talk about these things, because I think our past was buried, but I think it was buried with the intent to prevent these things from coming into our reality. That's what I'm starting to think. But I also think that our government doesn't have our best intentions in mind. So I think that there's probably two factions of our government, one that's evil and one that's kind of working for us in some way. So
I can see that. There's a lot of, when you get into the conspiracy realms, a lot of people who have some very interesting theories about the government. So we talked about the 33rd parallel. When we talk about that, it's very interesting that we have places like that align with the 33rd, Israel, Baghdad. When you get into this country, there's I believe, if I've mapped it right, it goes through parts of North Alabama. And one of the things that I've noticed is in the design, the great design of this particular country. We have Sedona and Shasta, and then there's another vortex uh, in and around the Asheville, North Carolina area. And I've talked about this before, how they make a great what I like to call a great triangle, a vortex triangle, essentially, across the country. And the zenith of it is there in North Carolina, very carefully placed away from the 33rd, because, of course, there's a lot of theories about the 33rd parallel, a lot of things that I don't believe that Huntsville, Alabama was picked by accident or coincidence to be the space capital.
Right.
Walter
Exactly.
von Braun did a lot of things there, and I lived in that area for a while, so there are things that I know about that area that I kind of just don't talk about a lot of times. But the fact of the matter is that area has direct effect on the areas that you and I live at. Uh, Central Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee, very uh, high activity of paranormal events, cryptid events. You mentioned how uh, these things kind of formulate uh, based on the environment. So you have a lot of reports of dogmen and things like that in these areas through here. Um, Again, when you get into Kentucky, uh, Ohio, Tennessee, the Carolinas, West Virginia, all of those areas, so there's a lot of high strangeness. And, and I think between the vortex there uh, in the high areas and the 33rd parallel, I think there's a very interesting balance of energy that they try to use, and they being a lot of different days, not just these entities that we're talking about that uh, are not do not have dominion in this world, but uh, other groups of humans even try to misqualify this energy a lot of times. And like I said, we have the Space and Rocket Center, NASA, we have Redstone Arsenal, a lot of places on the 33rd parallel that does interesting things, very interesting things. So your ideas, your theories, the things that you talk about are they answer a lot of questions, and this is what brought you to my attention, because I've heard some okay theories, I've heard some things that were interesting, but nothing that used science to explain some of the things. And we have a lot of people that want to follow on science to explain things for them. So you're offering that, a scientific explanation for something that most of us would call at best metaphysical.
Yeah, I think well, we can't see it, and that's what science does. Science goes, well, we can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, etc. So it doesn't exist. We can't measure it in some way. And but there's so they don't know anything about anything. I mean, even the theory of Einstein's theory of relativity and all this. I mean, there's talk about things that are far beyond anything that people can wrap their minds around. We still can't understand it because it's not something that we can measure. We just know it's there. I talked to when I was talking to Ed the other day on my show, it wasn't till I started off doing this show because I started getting a lot of synchronicities, and it was like a lot of signs. It felt like weird coincidences were happening, and I started getting these weird synchronicities, and I couldn't explain what they were. I kept saying, I don't know. I mean, I think it's maybe the angels, maybe like, God. I don't really know how to explain it. Now I do. Now I know it is the Holy Spirit that is being talked about in the Bible that guides us in that direction. And when we start to notice, the Holy Spirit is like rewards us with things. Like they start to, kind of point us in the direction of stuff. But you can't measure that. And if I try to sit down and tell some scientific guy that, or if you try to tell some scientific guy that I saw a Bigfoot or whatever, they're going to be like, you're crazy and all this stuff. Well, why would you say that? Why wouldn't you just go measure yourself? It's not hard to go in the woods, or it's not hard to go to Huntsville, Alabama, or Skinwalker Ranch like they're doing, and they're getting all these measuring equipments out there and trying to figure things out. In fact, that's where a lot of my ideas kind of spin from, is watching like Skinwalker Ranch and stuff like that. And I would sit there and I would, they're never going to tell you things that are going on for real, right? But they would allude to some things, and I would go, oh, let me look at that real quick. And I would, like I was just mentioning the frequency. I was just mentioning about the Native Americans, for example. They did an experiment where they had Native Americans came out and they did this frequency, boom, 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 over and over. They did this chant and they beat the drum, and they were using these like night vision goggles or thermals or whatever they were. And you could see the whole mesa glowing, right? And they were like, we don't know what it is. And they would just, in there, they would kind of, until next time, see you next time. And then I would be like, wait a minute, that's an interesting concept. Matter of fact, one of the things that I learned from there was that when they were studying, they were doing I can't remember the exact experiment on Skinwalker Ranch, but they were, the main guy, the guy from Alabama, matter of fact, whatever his name is, he was talking about how they looked like the electric field and the magnetic field were separated in this one region that they were measuring. He's like, it was like, to him, it was like, that blows my mind, because I didn't, that is a moment where time travel can happen, essentially. And I took that and I was like, what is he talking about here? Because, it's a complex thing that I just don't know much about. So I just started reading things, watching. I'm a dummy. So I had to literally go and like, what is an atom? What is an electron? What is a proton? And I have to go through this whole thing. But essentially that's what I came to the conclusion of, or at least my theory, not a conclusion, but it's like, when the electromagnetic field comes out of the earth through these in the form of telluric currents, through these faults and fissures and volcanoes and former, by the way, Bermuda Triangle is a volcanic seamount that's no longer active. So when these anomalies come out, these electromagnetic anomalies, they entangle with the magnetic fields of Earth, and they create a geodynamo feedback loop. In that feedback loop, there's a big chaos. There's a bunch of chaos going on because it's a feedback loop. Think about like a whirlpool, or like if you see in the ocean, what is is it called a whirlpool whenever two currents meet up and they start kind of spinning? Is it, I don't know, riptide maybe? I don't know.
I think it is a whirlpool, yeah.
Well, that's kind of what that is. It's a feedback loop. And that feedback loop, if you have electromagnetic field here, which is made up of electrical and magnetic fields doing this, almost touching, but not really. Mm-hmm. So you got one of those and then another one of those, and they interact. Well, that's going to cause a chaos. It's going to cause a magnetic interference, right? It's going to cause a little bit of a separation in the electrical and the magnetic field. And that little bit of a separation is where I think that opens up for these things to come in, right? It's that little moment of like that little portal, whatever you want to call it, time slip, whatever you want to call it. That's what I think is happening in that moment. And so that was an idea that started from Skinwalker Ranch. They didn't elaborate on it. Matter of fact, the next episode they didn't even talk about it again, like it never existed. So it was it felt like they were just kind of showing these things a little bit, and they were like, all right, we we can get up to this point, but we're not going to tell you any more about it or whatever the case is. So, but yeah, what they were seeing on Skinwalker Ranch was when that electrical and magnetic field was separated a little bit. That's where they would see these orbs fly in, and they look like they disappear for a little while, and then they fly out. And what I can't remember, Travis, that was his name, the guy from
Travis Taylor.
Yeah, Travis Taylor was saying that he thinks that they're just going back to another dimension and coming into our reality anytime they want. And that's kind of what I think is going on too. So
yeah, I've contemplated being really bold and try to get Travis Taylor on the show at some point, but I'm going to give it a little time before I get to that point, I think.
Well, I think they got a new season starting up, which I will watch. I just watch for entertainment because it's always, they pull away at the right moment and all that stuff. They don't want you to see all that, but there is some very interesting things that they do mention on there. So I think there is real science going on,
there is,
whatever you want to call it. There's real, techniques and things that are doing to try to like measure these things. And there was one where they saw this like invisible, I don't know how to structure. I don't know if you remember that episode. They had these cameras which they shot rockets in and into this area at the triangle, and it was like this this giant jellyfish, outline of a jellyfish almost. And they had these cameras that were capturing a bunch of frames per second. It was like thousands of frames per second or something like that. And what they caught was like that jellyfish, whatever you want to call it, that jellyfish structure or shape. And I think that was another one of those experiments. And I was like, they're around us all the time. They exist in this ether, this other world, this spiritual world around us, this black mass. Or, if you think about space, or if you think about like I usually have a plasma ball with me. If you cut on one of those little plasma balls you get from Spencer's and it has all the purple tendrils, well, those purple tendrils you think about the center of that plasma ball as the sun. And if you touch your finger, that's like Earth. That's like a node. That node is like Earth. And that purple tendril is like the Birkeland current that I was talking about earlier that hits the Earth, causes an electromagnetic pulse, and then shoots up these telluric currents. But all that black space when you see all the tendrils flying around, all that black space, that is where these things exist. That's where these things reside at. And we exist in the light. So.
Right. Actually, I do have Katie Page scheduled to come on an episode coming up. She was involved with and has been involved with some of the Skinwalker Ranch episodes, so she may have some interesting comments to put into perspective some of this too.
I've offered talking about this to a lot of people, but it doesn't. And when people hear it, they're like, "Oh shit, that's pretty interesting." But a lot of people, I don't know if it's because they don't think of it themselves or something like that. But for the most part, people who like hunt Bigfoot or who are into paranormal things, they go, "Yeah, this makes a lot of sense because it tracks with what we do." Like when you go hunt for Bigfoot and you go to the Smoky Mountains or somewhere, there's streams everywhere. So of course there's going to be a lot of paranormal activity. And it's likely, like I said, that you'll probably find some of those, circle structures in different places. If you just go look hard enough, you could probably find a lot of that stuff. So, yeah, it's just interesting that people doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in it right now. There was around in December when all these plasmoids were out, but that came and went pretty quickly. And it was like, all right, we're on to the next news cycle thing. And it's just like, yeah, but this is important because this is everything to me. To me, it is. To me, it helps explain a lot. And I'm too stupid to know a lot of these things. So I'm probably jacking up a lot of terms and stuff like that. But there are smart people who've written books about this. There's a guy named Robert Temple who wrote a book about it's called A New Science of Heaven, which is all about stuff I'm talking about, which is where I learned a lot of this stuff. So there's a lot of smarter people talking about this stuff than me. But the difference with me is I'm trying to go out and prove some of this stuff as well. I got EMF readers and all this other stuff that I'm going to go out and try to measure some of this stuff. And I don't have the budget like Skinwalker Ranch, but I'm going to try to, at least, feel it. When you go to a place, you can feel something different than what you can just talk about it. You get this energetic feel to something. But I at least want to take pictures and videos and at least show people that these places exist, because just talking about it is not enough. There's another place here where I live called Sugar Loaf Mountain. We don't have mountains here. This is flat coastal area in the Charleston area of South Carolina that I'm at. So I'm going to go explore that place. And why? Where's the mountains at? There's no mountains on the coast of Charleston. It's literally called the Low Country because of it's so low that if there's a massive storm, it's going to flood the whole city. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that, again, a lot of people just aren't talking about this stuff the way they should, in my opinion. But
right. And some of the things you brought up, Brian from Black Mass Paranormal has mentioned the pyramids in the Appalachian area. He's also mentioned a few things about the Cades Cove and some of the other areas of high strangeness around the Smoky Mountain area. He also likes to talk about the abundance of crystals, quartz crystals, in that area. And I know that there's other things, other minerals that are very predominant in eastern Tennessee and central Tennessee.
Well, quartz is like there's a piezoelectric effect that happens. That's why quartz is in watches, because when there's when there's pressure on quartz, it produces electricity.
Yes.
So, the Great Pyramids in Egypt have quartz in them. So,
yep.
In the upper, or in the King's Chamber, what they call the King's Chamber, it was just basically these generating stations for bringing in paranormal stuff. To me, that's what it is. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, that piezoelectricity is created from the pressure of, this constantly pushing on this quartz, and it's shooting off this electricity. So it's creating its own electrical field, which then creates a magnetic field, because it's an electrical field, which is electromagnetic energy. So you're creating. So if there's crystals nearby, that's why people have these. And I want to do an episode on the crystal skulls, because I do think that crystal skulls have this ability to recreate sort of a mini portal, if you will, for weird things to happen.
Yeah. There's definitely a connection there. There's a connection there between a lot of the minerals that are produced by the earth there in those areas. Hematite is has been mined and processed throughout places like the Land Between the Lakes, which is a hot spot of paranormal activity, cryptid activity. There's a lot of UFO sightings and so forth in those areas. So it's another one of those places that just has a hodgepodge of all kinds of stuff going on there.
Dude, it's everywhere. It's everywhere, but it's to me, it's where there are streams and all that stuff. Anywhere that, dude, in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, I believe, there's a volcano underneath the Capitol building. And a lot of people don't know that. So imagine that electromagnetic energy coming up funneled through this all this granite and everything, and then they have a spire on the top to sort of shoot that energy out into the world. So when they write something, they're writing something and it becomes more powerful. or if they say something, it becomes more powerful, which is what happens in
Mhm.
Atlanta and New York and all, all these places, Washington, D.C. That's why they have media centers there. That's why all these big, Hollywood is in Georgia, is in California. That's on the 33rd parallel as well, but they just moved to Atlanta, Georgia. They picked Atlanta, Georgia for a reason. So where they film most of their movies at is on the 33rd parallel. Almost, if they're not filming them in California and Georgia, they're also filming them in Arizona. Again, 33rd parallel. They're filming them in Alabama, which, Cat Williams just talked about buying an old military base and turning it into like a movie production theater. So it's like, these people know that there's power to these lines, like you mentioned with Huntsville being the former NASA headquarters. I mean, now it's I believe they moved it to, is it Birmingham? No, they didn't move it to Birmingham. They moved it somewhere else. But when you go through Birmingham, there's evidence all over. There's a Statue of Liberty there that was created by the guy who created the Statue of Liberty allegedly for New York. And so there's a state that was one of the first things I was like, I drove through Birmingham and I was like, why is there a giant Statue of Liberty here? And then my immediate thought was like, do a quick Google search to see if this is on the 33rd parallel. And it was, of course. It always is. When you see something odd, it's always like, okay, there's some, I think they're just markers for like heavier than normal electromagnetic energy. And I think that DC and all these places that have these obelisks, it's not a coincidence that the obelisk, that the Washington Monument is exactly 666 feet tall. And at the top of it, it has a capstone, aluminum capstone that conducts electricity and then shoots it down through the bluestone. The column itself is made of bluestone, right? Or it's encased in bluestone.
Mhm.
So it's creating this antenna, and it gets struck by lightning all the time. There's pictures of it being struck by lightning. But in the top of that capstone, it says, for God, or in God we trust, or something along those lines. But, I talked about this with Josh Monday from the Josh Monday Conspiracy and Christian podcast. Is like, are they worshiping the same God as us? God to us is Christ in light and love. What God are they worshiping if it's exactly 666 feet? You know what I mean? And they're harnessing this energy into the earth to create an electromagnetic pulse. And they're also shooting it out from that same region, right? So they're using it like a antenna to sort of spew it out into the ether. So
Right. Wow. We have covered so much tonight, and it's all good stuff. It's all stuff that, like I said, whenever I started diving into the things that you talk about, I was like, yeah, these are things that we need to be discussing, things that we need to be considering. And again, I try to keep an open mind. I try to present a rather large view of ideas on this show because I want people to know what information is out there. I want them to I want them to have the information to make choices and decisions on what they choose to believe, what they choose to research, and I want them to have these resources to go to find the things that are the nuggets that are buried out there. And I think this is one of those things that it has been kind of, you're putting it out there, but it's been kind of pushed under the rug in a lot of places for a while. So I think it's very important for us to consider this. What I find very fascinating, like I said, and uh, I can't state this enough, is that a lot of the things that you say answers a lot of the things that have been unanswered questions in the past. That's why I think that people really need to consider doing the research on this and finding out for themselves.
Yeah, I think you can't unsee it once you start seeing,
Right.
there's the electromagnetic or the frequency of the energy about everything. You start to understand that it's a frequency and an energy game. It's not it's a light versus dark game, right? Light
Mhm.
is energy. You need energy. We need energy to run through the walls to create these lights in our room, in our podcast studios right now, through our computers and all this stuff. So clearly it is uh, frequency and energy. That's what it's all about, and that's probably why they killed Tesla and made him go crazy and took all of his inventions and all that stuff. Right? It was because he started, talking about all this stuff. And um, but for me, it started in the conspiracy world. I started noticing things when you first start waking up. You start noticing all these weird things. Um, I started noticing weird conspiracies with politics and stuff because I just got out of the military and I was kind of getting into doing marketing and stuff like that. And I would see like, oh, they're manipulating search rankings and all this other stuff. And this was 15 years ago. This was 2009, 2010. And once I started seeing that, then it became like, okay, well, they're clearly hiding something from us. Must be paranormal. So then I got down the paranormal rabbit hole and I started seeing that they are in fact hiding stuff from us in the paranormal world. I started watching Skinwalker Ranch and George Knapp and all these guys, and I would go watch a video on YouTube and then the video would just disappear the next day. And I wouldn't be able to finish watching it. I'd be like, why would they take that down? It would say something along the lines of misinformation or whatever the case is, and it would take it down. But why would they take that down? It didn't make any sense. So then after, wrestling with all that, I was like, well, it's greater than paranormal and it must be spiritual. And that's where I kind of have landed at it so far, as the spiritual, but it's not just the spiritual. And I guess you can call it the spiritual, but to me, the ultimate is the energy frequency. Everything vibrates. Everything that we're in this room has a vibration.
Mhm.
It's either really dense or really, it's not as dense, I guess you could say. And um some of it's like we are not as dense as this desk or not as dense as the camera, whatever the case is, but everything has a vibration. And if everything has a vibration, that means that almost everything has a consciousness, probably not to the same degree that we have. So that's sort of where I'm taking it now, is like it's at this it doesn't feel like it's the end. It feels like it's just the beginning. Actually, it feels like I'm kind of like, okay, now what? Then we get into exploring multiverses and all this other stuff. And it's like, then you start to see again, but most roads lead back to God. Almost all roads lead back to God, and they're hiding God
Right.
from us. They're keeping us off the path of enlightenment. And unfortunately, they take us down these little rabbit holes with paranormal. They take us down rabbit holes with conspiracies and all this other stuff. And all of it is designed to take you off the path of understanding and knowing and enlightenment. So we can get caught up in these little whirlpools. And if you think about it like a straight line, if
Mhm.
our path is towards God and enlightenment, and we will never be like God. But if we're trying to, be more like God, and we don't have to be perfect, but if we're trying to be more like God and we stay on that path, then these little rabbit holes that take us off that, and they become little whirlpools almost, and you kind of get caught in those little whirlpools. It's like you ever watch cartoons and you see two cartoon characters fighting, and there's a big cloud and then one of them
Yep.
shoots out the cloud. It's kind of like that, right? We kind of get caught up in these little whirlpools. And you know it then we have to remind ourselves to get back on the path. And that's kind of where I'm at now. And that's kind of what I try to talk about on my show. I just don't do as good enough job as hosting as I do probably being on other people's shows. So but I'm trying to take it down that, I'm trying to keep people on that path of like, just understand that it's all designed to manipulate your energy and your frequency, and you have to really guard your energy and where you put things at, because they're harnessing it for their benefit. And they're giving that energy to some of these disembodied entities like the Nephilim, disembodied Nephilim. And you know they're doing a lot of bad things, man. They're sacrificing kids, and I'm sorry to say that on your show like that. I guess I shouldn't. Hopefully you can beep that. But they're doing a lot of bad things like sacrifices, and things that they shouldn't be doing to worship their gods like Moloch and all these other deities and these other beings that don't exist on this world, but they're feeding them that energy, they're feeding them that lifeblood, and they're feeding them they're keeping us at a low vibration and a low hum, sadness, fear. Every time you turn on it, there's a monsoon gonna hit, California, or there's an asteroid the size of a bus coming at Earth, and every time you turn on the news, you're gonna see that. But just know that it's all fake. It's just like when you go in, when you watch the Truman Show, or the movie The Truman Show, and Truman goes into the lady, the travel agent, and on the wall there's like pictures of lightning striking planes and all this other stuff. That's what they're doing to us. That really is what they're doing to us, they don't want us to leave this little bubble that we're in, this constant feedback loop, where we're going to work every day. They don't want us to leave that. They don't want us to enlighten and shoot off and exit that little cloud of dust, the cartoon cloud of dust. They don't want us to do that. They want to keep us right where they're at so we can keep feeding them. There's a great Rick and Morty episode about that. You guys check that out. That's right. Very similar. They need us to power their world.
Right. It's continuous, never-ending bombardment of trying to manipulate how we see things. So it's almost like they're continuously telling us the Titanic is sinking. And we already know that. We know that. We know that the Titanic had a dreadful end, but they want to keep playing off all of these things. The structure of our world is based on fear, how much fear they can present to us. And of course, you call, you say that they are trying to take our energy, they're trying to take our light, which is very true.
Which is why you get songs like "This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine." Don't let Satan blow it out, because that's the same thing I was talking about with. They don't want you shining that light. When you shine that light, it disperses them back. It keeps them at bay. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. You're very fine on that, because this is very true. We live in a society where as long as they keep us in fear and questioning all the time, we don't excel, we don't move forward, and they suppress the leadership that tries to speak this truth out. Many times, people who start speaking out these things wind up being sadly taken out by various things.
But they can't be taken out. You can't be taken out if you got God's light with you. You can't. Our free will, our intent is everything. That's why I was just saying our energy. That's our intent. We have to be careful where we give our attention, because when we give our attention to something, that's exactly what they want. Like I said, they take us off that path of understanding God and walking in the presence, not in the presence of God, but with God, or with Christ, hopefully towards God. Like I said earlier, I like to think that we want to be equal to the higher power, like Prosperity Witch said as well. I don't think it's possible to be like that, but I think there are some things possible. As long as not some things, there's all things are possible when you walk beside Christ, and when you have God, when you have Christ in your life, because He is the bridge from this material to the ethereal, right? He's that bridge from us, from the material world to God. And without Him, I don't think we could get there, because He is light. He is the embodiment of light. And I mentioned it the other day, if you think about the Trinity as the Godhead of the Trinity, as the Son, the total Son itself, God the Father is the Son. The light rays that come off of the Son is Jesus's light, or Jesus. And then the warmth you get is the Holy Spirit that fills people. So I heard that analogy and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I never looked at it like that. But I think that as long as we have that understanding of, that warmth is always around us. That's whenever someone said God is with you at all times, that's what that means, And I think as long as we have that with us at all times, we're protected. But we have to continue to pray to keep these things away. And we have to make sure that we don't consent to anything. We don't let the vampires in when they knock on the door. You know what I mean? We don't let,
Right.
dude, everything is about consent. You have to consent to everything. You have to consent in order for their magic to work. Like Vicky Joy Anderson said, they're a very legal bunch and they know the law better and the spiritual law better than anybody. And so they're going to use that to their advantage. And it's important for us to know that as well, that everything is about consent. When you drink alcohol, and I know I'm guilty of it too. When you watch porn, I'm guilty of it too. When you do any of that stuff, you're willingly inviting that kind of stuff into your life, and you have to be careful of that. So
100%. You do. Okay. We're actually just past about 15 minutes past the hour mark here. I want to, before we go tonight, I want to ask you for any final thoughts that you have that you would like to leave with us tonight.
I mean, I was just saying it, that consent, I think that's a major, I can't stress that enough. I mean, even you think about even when a cop comes to your door, right? They can't come in without your consent. They can't search your house without consent unless they have a warrant to do so. So it clearly has power, and so we have to be careful where we put our energy for sure. So if someone is, if Dan, if you're telling me right now that I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm never going to be anything, and I believe it, then you become my master because I'm a slave to you. I am letting you affect my energy. And so I think we have to be careful where we put that energy and who we give that. If somebody's yelling at you, just okay. Like you don't have to let it affect you. It does. It affects everybody. Whenever we get bad comments on our podcasts and all this other stuff, and you're an idiot and all this, it does affect us. But just understand that that's only one in a million people or a billion people that have said that, and it's a tiny fraction of it. It's so minuscule that this doesn't even matter. That's why you say it doesn't matter. It doesn't materialize. It doesn't mean anything. So just ignore all that negative vibration stuff, because that to me is where the evil one resides, is in that negative space, that negative energy. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I could not agree with you more. Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on tonight, and I'm sure our viewers appreciate it too, because you've given us a lot of nuggets to think about tonight and to explore. Um, really quickly again, where can they find you at online?
yeah, thank you to all the everyone in the chat right now, Pam and Rye and Tom and everybody, Prosperity Witch and Jeanette. Thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate you guys being a part of this discussion. I love being a part of live shows. I do one with Rye all the time from Codex of Curiosities, because I don't have like that interaction. I'm working on my YouTube channel now. I do have pretty good following on Spotify and Apple, and I would encourage anybody who is listening to this show to please follow me on Spotify and Apple, and also give the show a 5-star review if you can, because that is the kind of the currency we live in online, is comments and positive comments, hopefully, and 5-star ratings, because that helps us sort of skirt the algorithm. That helps us. I do marketing and search engine optimization and digital marketing for a living, so I know how it works. If you guys are giving me energy, in the form of likes and comments and stuff like that, the algorithm is gonna be hard for them to ignore it. So I'm not asking you to follow me because I'm some sort of a leader in anything. I am probably one of the stupidest people you ever meet, but I do try to process it through my brain and spew it out for people to help get an understanding of how I see things. And just know that, again, I'm no expert in anything. So I could be totally wrong about all of this stuff I'm saying, but I'm on that journey of, I might find something tomorrow on my show. I might have a guest on it bring something new to me, and I go, "Oh, I didn't think about that." And so I'm also adaptable. I'm not, I'm malleable. I'm like water, like Bruce Lee said. I'm formless. I'm shapeless. You can form me into something as long as I feel it in my instincts, in my gut, that it's right. So if you want to listen to all my babblings, you can you can follow me at theawakenedpodcast.com and subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. Like I said, I'm going to try to up my presence on there as well. So
good deal.
And thank you for having me on, dude. I appreciate that. It's really, really cool of you.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on. And yes, if you'll give me just a moment to go in and clear us out, I will hang with you back in the back for just a few moments after the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. I got to tell you, I'm excited to be able to do some research on the stuff that we have learned tonight. I feel like there is a lot of things that kind of answer some of the questions that I've had coming up. And if you have watched this all the way through to now, give me a like and give me a comment about what you think tonight, about what you've heard here. Does any of this resonate with you? If so, let me know how. If not, hey, let me know about that too. All right. So remember, check out the list of upcoming shows. They're on my YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to, you guys who are just watching me and have not hit that subscribe button yet, go on and hit it. You know you want to. And I know there are a lot of you out there because I watch my numbers. The analytics are telling me things. They're talking about you. And once again, if you would please go to magicaljourney.com and check out all the pages because there's good stuff on them. Meanwhile, you guys have a good and safe weekend, and may your journey always be magical.
I've waited for so long to see when you come back to me. Through the wars and battles that were lost, we're born again, it's you and me. The rest is history. Past lives. Past lives. Did we dance together on different floors in 1500 or 1504? We must have been lovers. We must have been something in our past lives.